A hush had settled over the Bennett estate long before the music ever arrived, a quiet born of grief and unanswered questions. Yet on the day, everything shifted. It wasn't grand design that changed their lives, but a single, unexpected knock. Mark Benton had barely wrapped the final slide of his investor briefing when the school's number flashed across his phone. Within minutes he was out the door, speeding toward the elementary campus where his daughter, Lily, waited curled in the nurse's office. She clutched her frayed bear, breaths quick and tight, eyes swollen from tears. The counselor explained that children had asked where her mother was, questions Lily never answered. Mark knelt beside her, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her cheek. He whispered that he was there, that she wasn't alone. But in the quiet that followed, their home felt more like a mausoleum than a refuge. Cold marble, untouched furniture, and long halls swallowed Lily's silence. Mark hovered at her bedroom door that night, knowing therapy alone wasn't reaching the fractured places inside her. Their housekeeper, Mrs. Duran, spoke what he already feared. Lily needed safety, not structure. She needed a way to feel without speaking. By morning, Mrs. Duran arranged a lesson with a local piano teacher known for helping anxious children. But the teacher canceled by email half an hour before the first session, an email Mrs. Duran never saw. That was how. At 5 o'clock exactly, a wind-tossed young woman with a food delivery bag ended up on their doorstep. Hannah Marlowe hadn't meant to step inside the Bentons' world. She'd simply shown up with an order, only for Mrs. Duran to beam and usher her toward the music room. Before she could correct the mistake, the housekeeper disappeared into the kitchen. And Hannah, too polite and too bewildered to protest, found herself walking toward the soft sound of a child's sobs. There Lily sat small, hunched, trying to fold herself from sight. When she finally lifted her head, she asked in a trembling whisper if Hannah knew Twinkle. Twinkle. Something in that fragile voice tugged at old memories of Hannah's abandoned music studies, of the life she left behind when her mother fell ill and her son was born. She lowered herself onto the bench and played slowly, cautiously. Lily's shoulders eased. A ghost of a smile appeared. Upstairs, Mark froze mid-stride as the melody drifted through the halls. When he descended, expecting to greet the real instructor, he instead saw a stranger beside his daughter, yet Lily looked calm, almost peaceful. He didn't interrupt. He simply listened, a quiet hope softening the edges of his grief. When Hannah stepped back into the cold night, she carried confusion and guilt. She hadn't meant to impersonate anyone. But Lily had smiled. A child who hadn't smiled in months. That alone lingered. Her small apartment that night felt even smaller. Her son, Owen, slept curled in a blanket on the couch. Bills whispered warnings from the counter. And yet her mind kept drifting back to the housekeeper's parting words. Same time tomorrow. She shouldn't return. But maybe one more visit would help Lily. Maybe it would help her, too. The next evening she arrived again, coat tidied, hands clean, rehearsing every scrap of piano knowledge she once had. Lily waited on the bench, legs swinging, and asked for a new song. Hannah shared a childhood melody her mother once sang during thunderstorms, imperfect but full of warmth. Lily listened, then rested a tiny hand on hers. "I like it," she whispered. It didn't need to be perfect. From the hallway, Mark watched again. Lily sat closer than she had with anyone in years, leaning into the music, breathing easier. Something inside him loosened. The third visit brought oatmeal cookies, Hannah baked from her last bit of sugar and flour. Lily held them to her chest and whispered they smelled like home. They spent the session creating a song based on Lily's dream of her mother disappearing in fog. Note by note, they rewrote the dream into something gentler. Lily titled it, Safe Dream, and drew a picture of herself holding the hand of a tall woman with golden hair. She wanted it pinned on the wall. Mark found the drawing later and felt awe and fear twine within him. Hannah had reached Lily in ways therapy and planning never had. But what if Hannah left? What if she vanished like Caroline had? Those fears returned days later when rain drenched the school pickup line and he saw Hannah waiting with Lily, soaked and shivering. He offered her a ride. The silence in the car wasn't strained, it was understanding. Mark spoke of his late wife for the first time in years, of their son who didn't survive, of the grief that swallowed their home. Hannah shared her own burdens, caring for her mother after a stroke, raising Owen alone, struggling every day to stay afloat. By the time they reached the driveway, something unspoken rested between them, recognition, perhaps, of two people carrying too much. Snow arrived the next morning, and from his office window, Mark watched Hannah wobble away on a thin, tired bike through the icy streets. That image lingered, and that night he quietly arranged rent assistance for her through a local outreach center. No signature, no credit, just gratitude. When Hannah arrived late days later, breathless and apologetic after a difficult morning with Owen, Mark didn't scold. He handed her a warm mug of tea. She confessed how lost she felt, how she moved through life without a safety net. He answered softly, telling her he understood enough to recognize strength when he saw it, but the truth came crashing in when his assistant sent a roster of the music center's instructors. Hannah's name wasn't on it. The real teacher had canceled. Hannah had never belonged there. That afternoon, he asked to speak with her privately. She confessed everything. She hadn't meant to mislead. She only stayed because Lily was crying, and she would leave if he asked. "Just don't punish Lily," she begged. Before he could respond, Lily burst in, tear-streaked, declaring she wouldn't speak again if Hannah were forced to leave. She ran to the piano and played "Safe Dream," her small body trembling with every note. Mark watched, overwhelmed. Rules suddenly felt meaningless compared to the fragile courage of his daughter, and as the last note fell, he knew what mattered most. The decision settled over Mark with surprising clarity. Though he had every right to end Hannah's visits, he couldn't ignore what Lily had become with her, steadier, lighter, willing to breathe beyond her grief. He told Hannah she could continue their sessions, not as an instructor with credentials, but as someone Lily trusted. The relief in her eyes was brief, yet profound, a quiet gratitude spoken without words. Still, the truth created a fracture in the fragile structure they'd built. Hannah carried guilt, afraid each visit might be the last. Mark carried questions he didn't voice. And Lily, sensitive to every shift in the adults around her, clung to their routines with new intensity. A few days later, an unexpected tension curled through the estate when Lily invited Hannah to watch her in the school assembly. The request startled Mark. He hadn't seen her ask anyone but her mother before. At the event, Lily stood on stage, hands trembling, but she lifted her chin when she spotted Hannah in the front row. She didn't sing loudly, but she sang it all, a small miracle. When the performance ended, she rushed to Hannah first, arms tight around her waist. Mark watched from a short distance, his chest full of something both painful and hopeful. But warmth alone couldn't hold back what waited beyond their sanctuary. One evening, after a lesson where Lily joyfully showed a new left-hand melody, Hannah stepped outside to find her ex, Darren Pierce, leaning against the railing of her apartment complex. He claimed he wanted to reconnect with their son. His promises felt brittle, his charm thin and familiar. She refused, guiding Owen inside quickly. The encounter rattled her. She feared Darren's return the way others fear storms, quietly, instinctively, knowing how much damage could follow. As days passed, small cracks appeared. Mark noticed Hannah arriving more distracted, shadows under her eyes deeper. Once, she flinched when he touched her shoulder to get her attention. Yet she dismissed his concern, apologizing with a practiced smile. The turning point came during Lily's winter recital at the community center. Hannah had helped her prepare for weeks. Lily wore a pale blue dress and asked Hannah to sit near the stage. She played her piece, fingers steady, gaze fixed on the woman who made her feel safe. but in the middle of the applause. Darren arrived. He stood in the aisle, calling Hannah's name loudly enough to silence the clapping. Owen, sitting with a neighbor, froze. Panic carved into Hannah's expression as Darren pushed forward, claiming to want his family back. His voice turned sharp when she refused, and murmurs rippled through the audience. Before the situation escalated, Mark stepped forward. He positioned himself between Darren and Hannah, speaking calmly but firmly. Lily grabbed Hannah's hand, frightened by the raised voices. Security escorted Darren out, still shouting. The recital continued, but something delicate had been broken. Afterward, in the quiet of the Bentons' garage, Hannah apologized frantically. She shouldn't have stayed involved with them. She shouldn't have brought danger into their lives. But Mark countered softly, reminding her she wasn't alone in anything anymore. She didn't fully believe him, but she wanted to. In the days that followed, both households seemed to spin toward each other. Mark invited Owen and Hannah to share dinner with him and Lily. Their children laughed together over spilled noodles. The adults spoke cautiously at first, then more freely. Lily began asking if Hannah could join them for movie nights. Owen asked if they could return. Something almost like a family rhythm began forming, tentative but real. One snowy evening, when a power outage swept through their neighborhood, Mark drove to pick up Hannah and Owen. They spent the afternoon in the Benton living room with blankets and lanterns. Lily and Owen built a fort between the sofas, whispering conspiracies. Mark and Hannah sat nearby, warm and close in the dim light. When Hannah's shivering hands brushed against his, neither pulled away. Silence lingered between them, comfortable, charged, undeniable. But just as the walls between them thinned, everything threatened to collapse. A week later, Darren returned again, this time confronting Hannah outside the grocery store. His voice rose, accusations flaring. When she tried to walk away, he grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. A passerby intervened, and Darren fled before police arrived. Hannah filed a report, but felt stripped raw. She didn't tell Mark immediately, worried she would burden him. He learned anyway when he spotted the bruise during a session. His expression darkened, not with anger at her, but at what she'd endured alone. He called the detective handling the case, made arrangements, and ensured safety measures were put in place. Hannah tried to protest, but he spoke with a steady certainty she hadn't heard in years. She didn't need to fight everything on her own anymore. The house grew warmer in the weeks that followed. Lily began composing little melodies for Hannah days. Owen colored pictures of the big house they visited. Mark found excuses to linger in the music room doorway, watching Hannah guide Lily through her lessons with endless patience. One late afternoon, as snow drifted against the windows, Lily played the final version of Safe Dream, the piece she and Hannah had begun months earlier. Her hands moved with confidence, her eyes bright. When she finished, she looked at her father and said softly that she didn't feel afraid anymore, that she wasn't lost. Not with them. The room fell still. Hannah blinked back in motion. Mark felt a weight lift he'd carried since the day Carolyn died. He stepped closer, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder, then met Hannah's gaze. Gratitude, affection, and something deeper crossed between them, outside. Dusk settled gently across the city, but inside the Bentons' home, a different kind of light grew quiet, resilient and entirely new. For the first time in a long while, none of them felt alone.